Okay, part 3, life on land. We're going to discuss the major biomes. So climate affects where organisms can live, and biomes are characterized by their precipitation and temperature. Those are the two main components to climate. And biomes also have similar soil and plants and animal. You'll hear plants called the flora and animals, the fauna. And plants and animals are going to have adaptations that are typical of the biome that they are living in. And again, those are going to be based on the precipitation and temperature of that climate. Okay, so these are the Earth's major biomes. I will not read them to you, but when we studied the currents, the ocean currents and the wind currents, we showed you why the biomes are located where they are and why the deserts were at 30 degrees latitude and longitude, etc. Okay, so some generalized effects of elevation and latitude on climate and biomes. We'll notice as you go away from the equator, that's what this is trying to represent right here. As you leave the equator, you have your tropical forest, deciduous, coniferous, tundra, polar ice, and snow. Well, the same pattern is represented if you are going higher in elevation over here as well. So, for example, where you'll have your tundra over above your coniferous forest over here, well, you're going to have a tundra over here above the tree line, because typically there's a place, there's I guess, artificial line where during some parts of the year the snow melts and it's above the tree line but below the permanent ice, and that's actually where you're going to find, like right here, that's where you're going to find a lot of the wildflowers that grow during the spring. If you ever had in Colorado in the Rocky Mountains, during the spring, you can see a lot of fun, really, really pretty wildflowers. It actually ends up drying out in more summers when you'll find those. But anyways, okay, natural capital. The average precipitation and average temperature are the limiting factors in these different biomes. So if you look at this graphic, where's my pointer? You see as you go to the right, we are decreasing precipitation. So even though this is latitude right here, so you're thinking that this is your tropical 0 to 20 degrees latitude, both directions. You will find rainforest, tropical seasonal forest, scrubland, savanna. So this is like your tropical, you're decreasing in precipitation pretty much. Okay, deciduous forest. This one should be familiar because this is where you live. Here, the temperature can have some of the same characteristics as a tropical area. It's got one of the highest rates of precipitation, 250 centimeters per year. Dominant vegetation, you're going to have your hickory oak forest. So basically your climax community species trees are going to be hickory oak. And remember, the stages of succession found in our area after there is a disturbance. You will find your annual grasses, your annuals, and then you'll find more of your perennial grasses and shrubs, and then eventually you would have the sun-loving pine trees, but then those would end up being outcompeted by the hickory oak. So everyone hopefully has had an opportunity it is fall right now, and hopefully you've had an opportunity to go see some of these leaves changing in the North Georgia mountains. Go to Helen, it's Oktoberfest, it's beautiful. Major locations, North America, Europe. Hey, would you look at that? So our first settlers who came over here from Europe were able to bring some of their species, and lo and behold, they actually proliferated well over here when they came to the new land because they had the same biome we do. Australia, because Australia's got a couple of other as well, and Eastern Asia. Characteristic animals that you'll find here are black bears, white-tailed deer, squirrels, raccoons, and opossums. Soil characteristics, very rich soil with high organic content because of the leaf litter. The fact that we have our deciduous leaves, which means they fall during the winter, and that's a way of preservation. Another important facts as well, they have slow decomposition rates, which is why the soil is so good. We have a high organic matter, so a high humus layer, horizon, if you will. Okay, tropical rainforest climate. Well, temperature is going to be tropical. Precipitation, 200 to 400 centimeters per year. Basically, what you need to know here, the reason the adaptations are such broadleaf is because the sunlight, especially when you are under the canopy, it's very, very difficult to get sunlight. That's the major limiting factor in a rainforest is light. So they have to have bigger leaves in order to try to have photosynthesis. That's one adaptation. Another thing is your vines and epiphytes are going to actually climb up your vines are climbing up trees in order to try to capture sunlight. And epiphytes, they're also called bromeliads. They're actually really pretty red flowers. And what they do is they have a commensalism, so it's a symbiotic relationship with trees, and they don't have their roots in the ground like typical plants and flowering plants do. Their roots are on the side of the tree higher up, so they can try to capture some of that sunlight, and that they're able to actually get their moisture from the air. So all the plants in the tropical rainforest are going to be adapted for low light. Locations, South America, West Africa, Southeast Asia. You're going to see monkeys, insects, amphibians, tropical birds. A lot of the species in the rainforest, again, are going to be adapted to live more in the canopy, because that is where all the MPP is happening. The soil characteristics, well, poor soil due to rapid rate of decomposition, because there's so much moisture that it decomposes so quickly that unfortunately, when the locals cut down, they go through deforestation to try to do farming, they're continuously having to cut more and cut more, because their crops don't stay very long, and they don't stay long term because the soil's so junky. What else? Stratification. Basically, that is just another name for layering. So stratification provides niches for specialized species, and this leads to high biodiversity. So here's an example of stratification. You have your ground layer. Remember, ground layer is going to have adaptations. Very low light is going to make it down here to the ground layer. Then you have your shrub layer. You have your understory. I feel like I'm looking at Diego, an episode of Diego right now with the Brazilian tapir. Canopy. This is where a lot of your organisms are going to live. And then these are going to try to outcompete. Look at these emergent layers. The little stinkers are trying to outcompete the one below it. Okay, grasslands. Climate, temperatures, tropical and temperate. Precipitation, 10 to 60 centimeters per year. The sod-forming grasses are adapted to fire. So this is one of the biomes that are most adapted to fire, one of two. The grasses are storing most of their biomass in the roots, and this is significant because after a fire, they are very resilient to a disturbance of a fire, and they come back easily. And also after grazers have eaten their tops. Major locations, North American plains, the prairies, America's heartland, Russia, we call them the steppes, South Africa, Argentina, and Africa, they call it the savanna. Characteristic fauna, and savanna, remember, that's the tropical grassland. Characteristic fauna, you're going to have your grazers and your browsers. Soil characteristics, very rich soil, and this has made the grasslands prime for human interference by agriculture, unfortunately. So also, we'll talk in a second. Other important facts, fire adapted, and a lot of large animals live in this area. You can see the tall grass, mixed grass, short grass over here. Okay, that's what I want to talk about. Since it's become such a prominent place for our agriculture, it is losing its biodiversity. And the reason for that, we talked a little bit when we watched our B movie about monocultures and how monocultures have disrupted the stability and the security and resilience even of this once very, very resilient area, because now after a disturbance, it's going to be more difficult for this land to bounce back and for the soil nutrients to go back into the soil. Taiga, the boreal or coniferous forest. This is going to be cold. Precipitation is 20 to 60 centimeters, mostly in the summer. This is where you're going to find your coniferous evergreens, small needle-shaped leaves with waxy coating to help conserve energy loss. Stay green all year because relatively low solar intensity year-round. This is a unique adaptation for the type of plants that live in this area so that they can stay green and not have to drop their leaves. Like they have to drop, your deciduous have to drop theirs. Major locations, northern North America, northern Eurasia. Typical animals found are bears, wolves, moose, lynx, and burrowing rodents. Let's see, continuation. Soil is thin here and nutrient poor because the acidic tannins in pine needles. And so you have to think about what would you have to do to treat that soil. You want to add some lime, right? Okay, another important facts, California giant redwoods. These are found in, so basically this is our Pacific Northwest, okay? So the redwoods, I wish we had my picture. I have a picture of me hugging one of these. Tundra is the cold, less than 25 centimeters. And so look, this is pretty much almost like a desert. Dominant vegetation and adaptations are herbaceous plants, low-growing plants, dwarf shrubs, and lichens, because there's a lot of moisture here. By the way, let me go back here for a second. I say there's a lot of moisture. There is frozen ice, and so then it melts, and then it has moisture. So let me rephrase that. Major locations: northern latitudes of North America, Europe, and northern Eurasia. You're going to find your caribou, migratory waterfowl, Arctic wolf, Arctic fox, musk oxen, snowy owl. What's important here is that these animals, it's taken thousands of years for these adaptations to appear in the populations, and so it is significant that these camouflage, like the Arctic fox, for example, the migratory waterfowl, the adaptations that they have. Let's look at all this fur right here. So as they lose their ice, then that's significant because they don't have other places to go. They are more of your specialist species. Okay, permafrost. So in order to be characterized as permafrost, you have to be frozen for at least 2 years. The underground soil, anyway, has to have captured the water, and it has to have been frozen for more than 2 consecutive years in a row. So if you think about that, look at some of the flora that has been frozen. Well, what happens when that ends up decomposing and then it's covered with ice, and then so as the ice melts, it is going to release methane and carbon dioxide, which are greenhouse gases. So that's also another concern, by the way, when we talk about climate change and the increasing polar ice melt. That is also going to contribute to the greenhouse gas and global warming effect. What else did I say? Most annual growth occurs in a 7 to 8 week long summer, very short summer. Okay, so the chaparral is a very desirable place for people to live, but it's very risky. You see, the temperature is very temperate. It's very mild. It doesn't change very often. It stays, we call it kind of like the Garden of Eden because it stays so mild and moderate. Precipitation is 50 to 75 centimeters. It usually gets their rain in the winter. And that's problematic because, like I said, a lot of people like to live here because it's just a really nice climate. So that is where the mudslides come in. And there's a lot of forest fires. So during the winter and the dry season, there's a lot of fires. So you have to just be cognizant of those 2 major issues if you're going to choose to live there. But some dominant vegetation. They have small trees with large hard leaves, spiny shrubs adapted to fire. And this is where you'll find lots of agapanthus, which I love. Those are lily of the valley. But they burn easily, the shrubs there, and the seeds actually need the hot fire in order to germinate. It's an adaptation. Major locations: Western North America, like I said, San Diego, that area, the Mediterranean. The characteristic fauna: mule deer, chipmunks, jackrabbits, lizards, a variety of birds. And these jackrabbits are fun. Their ears are an adaptation for heat. Soil characteristics: shallow and fertile soil, prone to fire in dry seasons, but it's a desirable climate. Okay, look at this. This is the only one where we'll give you club autogram because we wanted to show you how cool this temperature is, that it stays here. Look at that. Would you look at that? Awesome. Deserts. It's tropical. You have tropical deserts, temperate deserts, and you have just cold deserts because there's really a variance amongst the different types of deserts that we have. But in general, they have less than 25 centimeters. Some of them get cold at night. Some of them stay hot day and night. But there's a lot of quartz sand, and so therefore it doesn't have a very high specific heat like water does. So therefore the temperature varies a lot. It varies greatly from day to night in some of the deserts. Dominant vegetation adaptations: cactus and other low water adapted plants. We call these succulents, and examples of this are aloe vera and agave americana. If you break those open, they're juicy. They're waxy on the outside, but juicy on the inside. There's a lot of medicinal plants in the desert. Your cactus have adapted leaves. They have needles, and that helps with prevention of evapotranspiration. They want to keep their moisture. They don't want it to lose it to the atmosphere. Major locations: 30 degrees north and south of the equator. Hopefully you remember why when we did our discussions on the major convection cells. Characteristic fauna: camels, reptiles, rodents, and my favorite, I love kangaroo rats. They never drink water. The very coarse texture of their soil, not good at holding moisture or nutrients, so it's very problematic when sand dunes are disrupted from a lot of SUVs drive on sand dunes and they have a hard time to they're very fragile. So because they have slow plant growth, low species diversity, slow nutrient cycling, and lack of water. I think I made it. Done.